I'm Scott Erbes.
Curator of Decorative Arts and Design here at the Speed Art Museum. And I'm here to share with everyone an exciting exhibition we have coming up that'll open on February the 6th, an exhibition of contemporary glass. And I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started with our conversation. So, exhibition, which as I said, opens February the 6th, is called Collecting a Love Story, Glass from the Adele and Leonard Leight collection. And as you saw in the opening, I'm pleased to welcome this evening Norwood Viviano, my guest co-curator for this project. I first got to know Norwood when we worked with him to commission a piece for Leonard and Adele's collection back in 2016. And here you see one part of it. It's from a larger series of work that Norwood did over the course of a few years called Mining Industries. And as you can see from this, the piece that he did for Leonard and Adele was inspired in part by downtown Louisville. It's both its earlier industrial history and its present day life. And also, as a corollary to that, a piece that looks at the Martiki mine in eastern Kentucky, one of the largest of the surface strip mines in eastern Kentucky. So I just want to set the stage before Norwood and I talk about the exhibition a little bit. Leonard and Adele are both Louisvillians, though we're both native New Yorkers. Married for 69 years until Adele's death in 2018. I miss Adele greatly, as I know everyone who's associated with the Speed and who knew her do. And Leonard and Adele collected together for a remarkable 69 years. And over the course of that, they've donated over 450 works of art to the Speed. And I had the pleasure of working with them. I still work with Leonard on the collection. And I'm often asked, what makes for a great collector? And Leonard and Adele really embodied it. They loved the material. You have to collect what you love. They were committed to always looking and learning about the things that interested them. They trusted their own eyes. Every piece that entered the collection, they both had to agree on, which I think really sharpened the quality of what they finally settled on to add to their collection over the years. And just to give you a sense of where this collection resides when it's not at the Speed for this exhibition, and this wonderful house built in 1968. And this house predates the development of their glass collection. But I think it gives you a sense of their great eye for design. Though neither one had a background in art or in art history, Dr. Leight was a cardiologist for many years. Adele was a family therapist. But I'm convinced after my years of doing this that sometimes people just have sort of a natural visual ability to understand what looks good, what looks right. And certainly their house reflected that too. And here's just one room, just to give you a sense of how this collection lives its everyday life within their home. So the challenge for Norwood and myself was to go from 222 objects down to 69. Norwood, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your first impressions of the collection, and thinking about, the process we might take to start to wrap our heads around this quantity of great material.
Well, for me, I think that the greatest and most positive challenge was that the work in the collection was so strong. And I think that we, at least from the beginning, we knew that we couldn't show everything. We didn't have the physical space to show everything. And I also think that like a curatorial process is really important in terms of picking and choosing pieces, not just from well, I know that we chose things because we like them in some ways because we either like the aesthetic or we're interested in the themes. I think we also started to realize that there were connections between the works in the collection that at least I, who had already been through the collection twice, I hadn't really thought about before. And that was actually really exciting to sort of come up with a series of categories that then started to shape into an exhibition.
Yeah, that's a great point. I always say that you have to listen to the objects sort of tell you what
Mhm.
to do with an exhibition. It can't be the other way around. As a curator, I try not to go into projects with the really sort of preconceived notion of, here's the narrative I want to tell. Are there objects that can help me tell it? But rather, here are the objects. What are the stories? What are the narratives that they suggest? And how do they start to fall together into a cohesive whole? And every curator has their dream exhibition that might have 222 objects in it, but the reality is, because of space, time, resources, you're always having to whittle things down. And frankly, I think that always makes for a better presentation. It really forces you as a curator to really, constantly whittle things down. And, Norwood, I'd love to hear your memories of our sort of final whittling session when we were working in one of your studio classrooms on trying to just reach the finish line.
I think that there's a couple of things that I remember pretty clearly, and I think I'll just look at the whole thing globally, the whole process. For me, it felt like a real collaboration. So, in lots of different ways. So, collaborative in the sense that you and I, Scott and I, worked through the collection and had conversations about each of the pieces. And I think both of us felt strongly about all of the work that ended up in the exhibition. Not that there weren't pieces that we could have included and felt strong about. They just didn't fit into the way that we were thinking about the exhibition. But then I think from another point of view, the work resonated. And I may go on a little bit of a tangent here, but when I was thinking about the work, I was also looking at it from the lens of an artist. And so, as an artist, I'm often thinking about the research methods that somebody went through, not just they made the work and now it's in a collection or found its way to the collection, but the research methods that the artist went through, whether those were learning about the figure, whether those were learning about a particular theme and sort of working through several solutions and trying to understand how those solutions which one of those were the most successful. I actually reached out to a few of the artists and asked them a few questions as I was writing, and that actually informed some of the writing and the way that I thought about the work in the exhibition.
Yeah, and now you all out there can see why I asked Norwood to join me on this project. The perspective of an artist, I think, is always useful, particularly in some ways when you're dealing with contemporary material. And I'd spent so much time with this collection over the years that I really felt like to do it justice, to have an exhibition that could be the best it could be, I needed fresh eyes, fresh ideas, fresh ways of thinking. And I think collaborations like that are great. Oftentimes being a curator is sort of self-imposed exile when you're doing research and working on things, even on exhibitions. So to get fresh sensibility, fresh thoughts, I couldn't have done this well at all without having you involved, Norwood. So why don't we take a look at just a few of the pieces in the exhibition? It numbers, as we show here, 69 altogether, that range in date from the late 1960s up through 2019 is the most recent piece in the exhibition. And that's another remarkable part of Leonard and Adele's collection, is that they began collecting in the late 60s when artist-made glass in the United States was really a new and emerging idea. So as their collection evolved, they were often in the right place at the right time, because this movement was growing as their collection was growing too. So it's the collection is a remarkable historical document as well as just having some amazing work on an individual basis. So I think, at least here in Kentucky, when you think of contemporary glass, the name the late Stephen Rolfe Powell always comes to the fore. Stephen taught at Center College, started the glass program there and ran it for many years, was a mentor to so many students, many of whom went on are now have careers of their own as educators and as glass artists as well. And one of the things I always loved about Stephen's work is, aside from his sense of color, was really a sense of playfulness that you see in the title here, which the first word, of course, refers to Jimi Hendrix. And Stephen was famous in his studio for always having often classic rock, as I recollect from my visits, blasting in the background when he was working. Norwood, any thoughts on this piece?
I was just going to add that Stephen's research and techniques, I think, are really significant. He's using here a Marini technique, which is an Italian process. But why I think it's important is that Stephen is one of the early adopters of these sort of Italian techniques in America and influenced a huge amount of students that develop these traditions, that these traditions have evolved. I don't know if they've become Americanized, but I think that you see these techniques and patterns kind of growing across the country as the studio glass movement evolves. So I think that Stephen was really significant, and also significant to the region because of his teaching.
Yeah, well, and that brings us to our next piece by Shay Rhodes. Shay was one of Steve's students and then came to the University of Louisville to set up the glass program here, where he's still working. And, Norwood, do you want to touch on the Italian, again, this reconsideration of Italian traditional Italian technique going on here?
Yeah, so Shay is exploring a reticello technique, which is actually using really fine cane, and it's a very I wouldn't say it's necessarily a labor intensive, but it's a very stepped process. It can take several hours to make a piece like this, and what you have to realize is that in the process of making something like this, it's got to stay hot. You got to be turning it. You got to keep your attention on it. And so all of these steps, take a very long time to learn. And I think one of the things that I really love about this piece is you have these very beautiful techniques embodied in something that's like really, the contrast between the glass and the chain is actually pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I think that the attention to technique here is quite appropriate given sort of his conceptual approach to this.
Mhm.
I'm oversimplifying here, but Shea was inspired to make this series of buoys after attending a burial at sea and thinking in some ways about buoys as almost being like gravestones, which of course always have attention lavished on them as well. So there'll be several works in the exhibition by the husband and wife team of the late Stanislav Libensky and Jaroslava Brychtová. They were artists that Leonard and Adele were particularly drawn to, had a number of great works, actually visited the artists in their studio at the Czech Republic a number of years ago. And this is one of their classic works in which they're exploring geometry, but also they're so well known for a remarkable ability to understand and harness light as part of their compositions. Norwood, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I would say that Stanislav and Jaroslav are, I think, as a caster, they're certainly two of my heroes in terms of both being artists and managing the sort of cultural context of communist Czechoslovakia and finding ways to get their work out and their traditions out. And then also all of their research in terms of casting. I mean, that again, thinking about an artist like Stephen Rolfe Paul and the Libinskys, they had an incredible impact on younger artists, and a lot of those artists now are teaching and trading in a lot of that technology and experience that they learned from them.
Yeah, and I think their work is quite remarkable too when you consider that so much of it was being made in the Soviet era, with very stringent uh, censorship of what artists could and couldn't do, and to be able and they ran afoul of the authorities, but managed to persevere with their artistic practice.
Well, in the
So
work,
now,
I would just
oh,
quickly add the work is beautiful and it looks effortless in some way, but it takes an incredible amount of time and um, experience to make work like that.
yeah. And one of the more recent works by Jeffrey Gibson, this again was a commission piece of Leonard and Adele's, and I had the pleasure of working with Jeffrey on this project, as I did with Norwood on his commission. And that's always so rewarding to have that dialogue with an artist and to really understand their process, their conceptual process as they execute a work. And this references lyrics from a song of the same name. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. Probably best known for the performance done by Nina Simone in 1967, which ties into the civil rights movement. And Jeffrey is an enrolled member of the Choctaw Nation, and bringing his Native American background into his work too is part of the dialogue going on here too. Yeah, I know Norwood. I know you really enjoyed seeing this work when you first saw it at Leonard and Adele's.
Well, I think that the thing that this piece and some of the other work in the exhibit starts to talk about is the future of the field of glass. So, here we have a piece that is not sort of rooted historically in craft, but more fine art or contemporary art practice. And as an artist, I don't necessarily abide by all of the kind of boundaries or categories, but I think that what's important about this work is all of the things that you've said, for its kind of social justice message, but also I think it speaks to the evolution of the field of glass and the potential of what artists are doing now.
Yeah. Which brings us to Joyce Scott, who like Jeffrey Gibson, a so-called MacArthur Foundation Genius recipient. And I had the pleasure of getting to know Joyce when she came to the Speed a couple of years ago. A remarkable person, a remarkable artist, a remarkable performer, not just as an artist, but as a speaker, as a singer, and so many things. And Norwood, I'll let you talk a little bit about this.
Well, I was just going to. I have not had the opportunity to actually meet Joyce in person, but I watched while I was researching her work. I watched several videos of her talking about her work, and one of the things I was struck by was just the way her kind of persona. I mean, I felt like her persona, her way of working, and the work that came out of it were all sort of like tied together, like very much rooted in this person.
Yeah, and the themes you see in Joyce's work consistently deal with, again, with like Jeffrey, racial injustice, patriarchy, misogyny. I mean, these are the
Mm.
themes that she deals with, but she very intentionally does it using visually seductive materials. Beadwork is her main medium, but here she worked with the Venetian glass artist to make the bust form itself. So, she draws a viewer in with these amazing compositions, but then the message is really what strikes you. And she says, she always, I'm paraphrasing her, but always hoping that the experience with her work will make people rethink their own beliefs.
I think it's the beadwork in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
This really, and it's you can't see it in an overall image like this, but the beadwork in her pieces is really exquisite. So it's like you can see every kind of sewn element in terms of how things are made.
Yeah. And I'll leave this one to you, Norwood, since this is really a work that's very intentionally about glass.
Well, I would sum it up in the sense that Mary Schaefer is a really important uh, person, artist in the field of glass, especially the early glass movement, which had very few female artists. These pieces operate a lot like paintings. So, but they are really displaying the movement of glass in relationship to other kinds of structural elements. Just by heating up the material, you kind of get this result.
Yeah. And one of my favorite works of art in this exhibition is this one by Josiah McElheny. It, his work, his approach, it, it's he's I'm at a loss for words because to hear him talk about his work and what the process that goes into it. Um, Again, again a reason he's a MacArthur Foundation Genius recipient. I mean, just the thoughtful process, the idea that history is not what it seems to be always, and I think that's one of the things I love about this work. What are your thoughts, Norwood?
I like the blending of history. Josiah's work often, and I think again, like Jeffrey Gibson and to a certain extent Joyce Scott, their work kind of crosses over between a lot of fields. Josiah, I think, is known more outside of the craft field now, in glass field and in contemporary art. But I think the kind of the history, the rooted history in like Vanini and explorations in color and form make these kind of objects in a lot of ways timeless. Like I think that you don't really think about them as kind of vessels. You think about them as shapes and light, and they're very ephemeral, which I think helps kind of reinforce ideas of time.
Yeah, yeah. And then our last piece to share. Heaven knows we could drone on about a lot of things, but this is a personal favorite of mine by the Danish team of Micha Karlslund and Steffen Dam. The Structure of Everything, which is certainly a title applied with irony, the idea that somehow all human knowledge can be reduced to a single object, I think is an intriguing one. I think it certainly maybe speaks to human arrogance in a way. But they've described these works from this series of pieces as being narrative vessels, almost like ancient Greek pottery might be, where a story was being told around the vessel form. So it's an updating of that. Norwood, any thoughts on this?
I was just going to add that one of the things that I really love about this piece is the same thing that I love about the Greek pottery and the way that the story kind of unfolds around the object. So it really encourages me to be an active participant in the work rather than sort of statically viewing the work.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's, you see these themes of, technology within the imagery used, of technology being overlaid over nature, which again, that idea of I'm afraid, human arrogance in a way. So I hope those of you that are here in Louisville and elsewhere will come and visit the exhibition. As I say, it opens February the 6th and will run through June. 69 objects, over 50 artists from literally across the globe. So I hope you'll come, enjoy the exhibition, experience not just the great objects, but the story of collecting, Leonard and Adele's story as collectors that we talk about within the exhibition as well. Such a remarkable couple, inspiring to me and so many other collectors too.